He was a high-flying executive, and she was the wife he'd long dismissed as a simple homemaker, someone over her head in his world of high finance. He told her he was going to the most important dinner of his career, a dinner to save his failing company by impressing a new, mysterious investor. What he didn't tell her was that he was bringing his young, ambitious mistress to celebrate the win he felt he deserved. But what she never told him was that she was the mysterious investor. The stage was set for a public unraveling, and by the time the appetizers arrived, one person's life would be in ruins. The Waterford crystal glasses in Eleanor Vance's hand were so fine they seemed to hum with tension. She polished the rim of a champagne flute, her reflection staring back at her from the immaculate glass. It was the face of a woman who had everything: the sprawling Greenwich estate, the manicured gardens, the perfect high-achieving son, Thomas, away at Phillips Exeter, and the husband, Richard, a VP at Stratford Industries, whose star, she was told, was perpetually on the rise. But the reflection was a lie, and the house was a cage. The marble under her feet was cold, echoing the silence that had become the soundtrack of her marriage. Richard had been home for less than 10 minutes, long enough to tear off his silk tie, toss his Brioni jacket over a priceless Louis XV Noir chair, and pour himself a 2-fingered glass of Macallan 25. He hadn't kissed her. He rarely did. "Big night, Ellie," he announced, his back to her, as he stared out the bay window at the twilight descending over his perfect lawn. He always called her Ellie. It was a name that felt like a pat on the head, diminishing, a nickname for a girl, not a woman. Eleanor placed the flute back in the cabinet. "Oh? Another late one?" "The late one, the one that matters," he said, swirling the amber liquid. "We're finally meeting the principal from Vanguard Capital. This is the one I've been working on for 6 months. This E. Vance is the white whale. No one's ever seen them. They're a complete recluse, but they're sitting on billions. If I land this investment, Stratford is saved, and I'm looking at a senior partnership." Eleanor felt the familiar, dull ache of being dismissed. "E. Vance," she repeated softly, testing the name. "It sounds familiar." Richard laughed, a short, barking sound. "Don't worry your pretty little head about it. It's high finance, not a charity luncheon. All you need to know is that your husband is about to become a very, very big deal." He walked past her, pausing to adjust his cuffs in the hallway mirror. "I've got to meet the team for a prep session before the dinner at L'Etoile. Don't wait up." "L'Etoile?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "That's extravagant. You must be confident." "It's the cost of business, Ellie," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You have to spend money to make money, something you wouldn't understand." He was out the door before she could reply, the heavy oak clicking shut with a funereal finality. The scent of his expensive cologne hung in the air, mixing with the lemon oil she'd used on the furniture. Eleanor stood motionless for a full minute. Something you wouldn't understand. For 15 years that had been his refrain. He had conveniently forgotten that Ellie was Eleanor Vance, a summa cum laude graduate in finance and economics from Wharton. He forgot that she had been the youngest analyst in her day at Morgan Stanley, the one they called the Oracle, until she had agreed to step back, to support his career, to raise their son. He had wanted a beautiful, intelligent hostess for his parties and a manager for his home. He had not, it turned out, wanted a partner. Her compliance had been her mistake. Her silence had been his poison. She walked slowly into his study, a room she rarely entered. It smelled of leather and his self-importance. His laptop was open on the mahogany desk. It was a breach of trust, perhaps, but trust had been breached long ago. She moved the mouse. The screen flickered to life, no password required. He was that arrogant. His personal email was open. He was careless. It didn't take long. A folder labeled travel, receipts, hotel confirmations, the Singapore deal from 3 months ago, a 2-week trip. She saw the hotel booking, 1 king suite, non-smoking, at the Marina Bay Sands. But the airline receipt attached was for 2 tickets, his and one for an Ms. Amber Rawlings. Then, the credit card statements. The Amex Black he was so proud of. A charge from 2 days ago. Cartier, 5th Avenue. A love bracelet, rose gold. A charge from yesterday. La Perla, lingerie. A charge from this morning. Bergdorf Goodman. A cocktail dress. It wasn't for her. Her birthday had passed last month, marked by a generic floral arrangement and a distracted kiss on the forehead. The pain was sharp, but familiar. It was the final, dull click of a lock falling into place. She had suspected, of course. The late nights, the sudden business trips on weekends, the scent of a perfume that wasn't hers clinging to his shirts. But this was the spreadsheets, the data. This was the language she understood. He wasn't just careless. He was contemptuous. He believed her to be a fool. She closed the laptop, her hand steady. The crystal glasses downstairs were humming, but she was vibrating with a cold, pure energy. E. Vance. He'd said it with such dismissal. He had no idea. 5 years ago, a distant Aunt Eleanor had only met twice, had passed away, leaving Eleanor her entire, surprisingly vast fortune. It was old money, discreetly managed, and it was left to her, not to Richard. He'd laughed it off as her little inheritance, her shopping money. He hadn't paid attention. He never paid attention. She hadn't gone shopping. She had called David Chen, her old mentor from Morgan Stanley, a man who had been furious when she'd retired. "David," she'd said, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm coming back. But not for them. For me." For 5 years she had been working. While Richard was at his office playing the big shot, Eleanor was in this very study, in the mornings after he'd left, and late at night after he'd fallen into a drunken, self-satisfied sleep. She wasn't managing a household, she was managing a portfolio. Vanguard Capital was her creation. David was its public-facing president, but the principal, the true owner, the one whose instincts they followed, the one whose signature, E. Vance, was on every final directive, was her. She was the recluse. She was the white whale. And she had been looking at Stratford Industries' portfolio for months. The company was a bloated, dying dinosaur. Richard's division, in particular, was a catastrophic sinkhole of bad investments and leveraged risks. They were desperate. They were bleeding. When their desperate pitch for a lifeline investment had crossed her desk, she had seen her husband's name on the executive summary. She saw his projected figures, the inflated, arrogant numbers he'd clearly pulled from thin air. She could have just clicked, reject. But where was the justice in that? "No, David," she had said on the phone just yesterday. "Don't reject it. I want to take the meeting." "Eleanor, it's a dog," David had warned. "The company is worthless. Your husband's division is a dumpster fire." "I know," she'd said, looking at the Cartier receipt on her husband's laptop. "It's not an investment meeting, David. It's an acquisition, a hostile one. Book the private room at L'Etoile. I think it's time for Ms. Vance to finally make a public appearance." Now she stood in the silent, opulent hallway. Richard thought he was going to a dinner to secure his future. He thought he was bringing his mistress to celebrate. Eleanor smiled, a thin, cold expression that didn't reach her eyes. She walked upstairs to her own closet, past the beige cardigans and sensible skirts Richard approved of. She pushed them aside, revealing a section at the very back. There, hanging in a garment bag, was a custom-made steel-grey Armani power suit. She had been saving it. "He's right," she whispered to the empty house. "It is a big night." The bar at L'Etoile was a symphony of hushed wealth, low lighting, gleaming mahogany, and the clinking of ice in heavy crystal. Richard felt a surge of power as he slid onto the leather-bound stool, Amber Rawlings slipping in beside him. She was 26, with hair the color of expensive honey and a manufactured brightness in her eyes. She wore the Bergdorf dress he'd bought her, a tight, emerald green number that left little to the imagination and everything to his ego. On her wrist, the Cartier Love bracelet gleamed, a tangible marker of his conquest. "Richie, this place is divine," Amber cooed, running a manicured nail down the lapel of his suit. "Are you sure I'm not underdressed?" "You're perfect," he slurred, emboldened by the 2 scotches he'd consumed in the car. "You're a work of art, and tonight you're my executive assistant, my secret weapon." Amber pouted. "I don't want to be your secret, Richie. I want to be the weapon. You promised. If this deal goes through, you're leaving her." "You're leaving... what's her name? Ellen?" "Eleanor. And yes." "Of course," he said, waving the bartender over for another round. "This is it, babe. This Vanguard capital is the key. Their money washes all the complications away. Stratford Industries has been riding my division for a year. They're desperate. My boss, Harrison, he's practically wetting himself downstairs. But I set this up. I got the meeting with the mysterious E. Vance." "Who is this person, anyway?" Amber asked, sipping the champagne he'd ordered her. "You said they're a recluse, some old money ghost. Probably some 80-year-old fossil in a dusty suit. The point is, they're sitting on a dragon's hoard of cash, and they're looking for a place to put it. David Chen, the president, loves our projections. It's a done deal. Tonight is just a formality, a victory lap, and I wanted you here to see it." This was a lie. The dinner had been confirmed only yesterday. His boss, Michael Harrison, a nervous, rabbit-like man, was already waiting in the private dining room. Richard had called Amber an hour ago, high on his own arrogance and the thrill of the impending kill. "Amber, screw the prep session," he'd said, his voice giddy. "Meet me at L'Etoile. Private room, top floor. I'm introducing you as my assistant. Harrison won't say a word. He needs this deal too much." "Is that smart, Richie?" she'd asked, though she was already doing her makeup. "It's a power move. It shows I'm confident. Besides, this E. Vance is a nobody. Who cares what they think? It's the money that talks. And by midnight, I'll be the man who saved the company." Now, sitting at the bar, he felt a flicker of doubt. Bringing Amber was reckless. It was a F.U. to his boss, and, in a way, to the investor. But one look at her, in that dress, looking at him with undisguised adoration, or a very good facsimile of it, and his ego swelled again. He deserved this. He deserved her. He was tired of Eleanor. Tired of her quiet competence, her muted colors, her predictability. He was tired of the unspoken judgment he sometimes felt radiating from her, as if she knew better. Her, with her garden club and her book charities. What did she know of his world? The pressure? The genius it took to move millions around the globe? She was a relic of a life he'd outgrown. Amber was his future. "So, after you signed the papers," Amber murmured, leaning in so he could smell the Chanel on her skin. "What's the first thing we do?" "First," Richard said, downing the last of his drink, "we go back to the city apartment. we open that bottle of 98 Petrus I've been saving, and then, tomorrow, I go home to Greenwich, and I finally tell Eleanor it's over." "And the house?" Amber asked. Her eyes were sharp. "I like that house." "The house is half mine. She'll get her share, she'll be fine. She can go back to, I don't know, whatever it is she does all day. Polishing silver." He laughed, a thick, cruel sound. "She won't know what hit her. She's completely clueless. Probably thinks I'm in a board meeting right now, stressing. She's probably, I don't know, knitting." "Poor thing," Amber said, with no sympathy at all. She checked her lipstick in the reflection of her phone. "Well, I can't wait to meet this Mr. Vance. Should I be charming?" "He's just a man, babe. A man with a checkbook. Just smile, look smart, and let me do the talking. He'll be eating out of my hand." He threw a $100 bill on the bar. "Come on. Let's go meet my boss. Try to look professional." Amber gave him a sly smile. "Oh, I always look professional, Richie. You know that." As they walked towards the private elevator, Richard straightened his tie. He felt invincible. He was a king, and he was about to claim his kingdom. He had his brilliant projections, his unshakable confidence, and his beautiful mistress on his arm. His dull, boring wife was miles away, probably asleep. Everything was exactly as he'd planned it. While Richard was preening at the bar, Eleanor was moving through the shadows of her own life, executing a plan 5 years in the making. Her transformation had begun not with the inheritance, but with the first time Richard had called her cute for correcting his math on a mortgage amortization table. It had begun with the birth of their son, Thomas, when Richard had patted her hand in the hospital and said, "Now you have a real job." The inheritance had simply been the ammunition. When the notification from the probate lawyer had arrived, Richard had glanced at the sum, a staggering amount that he hadn't even known her family possessed, and had immediately started planning. "A new boat, Ellie. We could buy that summer place in the Hamptons. We could—" "No," Eleanor had said. Her voice was quiet, but for the first time it was utterly inflexible. "This is mine, Richard. The will was very specific. It is not community property. I'm putting it in a trust. For Thomas." Richard, seeing his new boat sail away, had scoffed. "A trust? What do you know about managing a trust? Just give it to my guy at Stratford. He'll handle it." "No," she'd said again. "It's handled." That was the day she'd called David Chen. David, a razor-sharp strategist who had been pushed out of Morgan Stanley for being too aggressive, was running a small boutique advisory firm. He'd been waiting for a call like hers. "Ellie Vance, the Oracle," he'd said, his voice cracking with a smile. "I knew they couldn't keep you in the suburbs. What's the play?" "The play, David, is that I'm tired of being underestimated. I have capital. Significant capital. I want to build something. Something quiet, something powerful, and something that is entirely mine." Vanguard Capital was born in her breakfast nook over cups of tea and encrypted laptops, while Richard was in Singapore or London closing deals. David became the public face, the president. He was the negotiator, the voice on the phone. But the strategy, the analysis, the final kill-switch approval? That was Vance. Eleanor had worked with a ruthless, surgical precision she had forgotten she possessed. She hadn't just invested. She had leveraged. She had forecast. She had predicted the fall of 2 tech giants and the rise of a biotech startup, multiplying her initial inheritance tenfold, and then again. She operated from a ghost office in Delaware, a post box in the Caymans, and a secure server in Switzerland. She was the best-kept secret in high finance, and it had been easy, because, as she'd realized, No one ever looks at the wife. She was invisible. She was the woman dropping off casseroles, chairing the PTA fundraiser, and arranging Richard's dry cleaning. Her husband, her friends, the world, they had all willingly participated in the illusion that her brain had softened, that her ambition had evaporated with motherhood. They had no idea that the woman arranging flowers in the hall was, at the same time, mentally dissecting a hostile takeover bid. They didn't know that Ellie was E. Vance. When Stratford Industries' pitch had come through, it was almost laughably pathetic. The company was a sinking ship, and Richard's division was the anchor. He had been cooking the books. Not well, but with the brazen arrogance of a man who believes no one is smart enough to check his work. He was leveraging assets the company didn't have, promising returns based on markets that didn't exist. He was, in short, a fraud, and he had, she discovered, been funding his lavish life with Amber by taking out unsecured, high-interest bridge loans against their house. The house she had put the down payment on, from her old Morgan Stanley salary. The house he had, through legal chicanery she hadn't bothered to check until it was too late, put entirely in his name. He was defaulting. The bank was preparing to seize the property. Eleanor, as E. Vance, had made a single phone call. "Mr. Patterson," she'd said to the head of the bank's commercial debt division, a man who owed Vanguard a favor. "I see you hold the note on a certain Greenwich property. Stratford Industries is about to go into receivership." "Yes, it is." "I'm buying that note, all of it. At a discount. Consider it a favor." In a single 20-minute transaction, Eleanor had become her husband's creditor. She owned his debt. She owned the house. Now she stood before her full-length mirror. The steel-grey suit was severe, the fabric impeccable. She'd paired it not with pearls, but with a single, sharp diamond pin on the lapel. Her hair, usually in a soft, domestic bun, was pulled back into a sleek, severe chignon. Her makeup was minimal, her lipstick a slash of deep, confident red. She looked nothing like Ellie. She looked like an executioner. Her phone buzzed. It was David. "In the lobby. Harrison is here, and he's brought company." "Company?" Eleanor asked, slipping her feet into black, pointed-toe Manolo Blahnik stilettos. "A young woman. He introduced her as his executive assistant, Amber Rawlings. Richard is being familiar with her. In public. The man's a fool, Eleanor. He's handing you the knife." Eleanor felt a cold, clean wave of fury. He hadn't just brought his mistress. He'd brought her here. To this meeting. Her meeting. He was flaunting his betrayal in the very room where he was meant to beg for his professional life. The arrogance, the sheer, blinding hubris, the last flicker of Ellie, the wife who had once loved him, the woman who might have felt a shred of pity, died. "Thank you, David," she said, her voice dropping to a low, chilling monotone. "Let them wait. Order a bottle of the 05 Petrus, and then send the sommelier to the cellar. I want the 98. Have it brought to the table. On ice." "On ice, Eleanor? A 98 Petrus?" David sounded scandalized. "Yes, it's a personal joke. I'll be down in 5 minutes." She picked up her briefcase, a slim, lethal-looking alligator skin case. It contained one item, a single bound file containing the complete, fraudulent history of Richard's division and the original, defaulted mortgage note for their home. She walked out of the bedroom, not looking back at the remnants of her married life. She was no longer Eleanor, the wife. She was E. Vance, the founder of Vanguard Capital, and she was about to liquidate her husband's life. The private dining room at L'Etoile was suffocating in its opulence. Thick carpets muffled all sound, and a heavy crystal chandelier cast a judgmental light over the table. Michael Harrison, the CEO of Stratford, was visibly sweating. He dabbed his upper lip with a linen napkin, his eyes darting between Richard and the closed door. Richard, by contrast, was leaning back in his chair, a picture of smug confidence, one hand resting possessively on Amber's shoulder. Amber, for her part, was taking photos of the centerpiece with her phone, bored. "When is this Vance person showing up? This place is dead," she whispered, loud enough for Harrison to hear. "Patience, babe," Richard murmured, squeezing her shoulder. "Reclusive billionaires like to make an entrance. It's part of their mystique." "He's probably just old," Amber sniffed. The door opened. All three of them, Richard, Amber, and Harrison, looked up. A man entered first, Asian, impeccably dressed, with a calm, analytical expression. This was David Chen, the man they'd been corresponding with. Richard started to stand, a broad, political smile plastered on his face. "David, a pleasure to finally meet you in person. Richard Vance, Stratford Industries." He stuck out his hand. David looked at it for a second before shaking it, once, firmly. "Mr. Harrison." "Mr. Vance," David said, his voice neutral. He did not acknowledge Amber. "And this is my executive assistant, Ms. Amber Rawlings," Richard said, pulling her forward slightly. David's eyes flickered to her, a brief, dismissive glance. "I see." Richard's smile faltered. "And Mr. E. Vance, is he?" David Chen stepped to the side, holding the door open. "Mr. Vance couldn't make it, but he sent the principal and founder of Vanguard Capital in his stead. Gentlemen, Ms. Amber Rawlings, may I present Miss E. Vance?" The click of stilettos on the hardwood threshold was the only sound. She entered the room. If Richard had been struck by lightning, the effect would have been less dramatic. His smile didn't just fade, it collapsed. The color drained from his face, leaving a pasty, sickly gray. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish suffocating on dry land. Michael Harrison just looked confused. He squinted. "Eleanor? Eleanor Vance." "Richard, what? What in God's name is this? Is this a joke? Is your wife? Is she pitching for you?" Amber was the slowest to react. She looked from Richard's horrified face to the woman in the doorway. She saw the suit. She saw the cold, commanding presence. She saw the face she had only ever seen in faded Christmas cards on Richard's desk. "Wait," Amber whispered, her voice suddenly small. "Richie, who is that? Is that your wife?" Eleanor glided into the room. She did not look at Richard. She did not look at Amber. She walked directly to the head of the table, the seat they had all left vacant, and placed her alligator briefcase on it. She turned to Michael Harrison. Her voice was not the voice of Ellie. It was a low, crisp, boardroom contralto, sharp enough to cut glass. "Mr. Harrison, a pleasure." She extended a cool, dry hand. Harrison, baffled, shook it. "Ms. Vance, I don't understand." "You are here," Eleanor said, "because Stratford Industries is insolvent, and you are seeking a $200 million capital injection from my firm. Please, sit." She gestured to the table. She still hadn't made eye contact with her husband. Richard, moving like a man in a dream, stumbled back into his chair. Amber, wide-eyed, sat down hard, her bravado completely gone. Eleanor remained standing. David Chen stood at her right, a silent sentinel. "Richard," Eleanor said, her voice devoid of all emotion. He flinched, as if she had struck him. He looked up, his eyes wide and terrified. Ellie. What is... I don't... The name," she said, her voice lethally quiet, "is Miss Vance. You will not call me Ellie again." She slowly unclasped her briefcase. "Now, shall we begin? Or would you like to introduce your colleague properly?" The silence in the room was absolute. The only sound was the faint thump of Richard's heart, which he was certain everyone could hear. Amber, realizing she was the target, stiffened. "I'm quiet," Eleanor commanded, without looking at her. It wasn't a request, it was an order, delivered with such freezing authority that Amber physically recoiled, her mouth snapping shut. Eleanor looked at Richard. Her eyes were not angry. They were not sad. They were the eyes of a banker looking at a defaulted loan. It was an assessment, a calculation. "You're in my chair, Richard," she said softly. He stared, uncomprehending. "What?" She pointed to the chair she always sat in at their dining table at home, the one at the opposite end, the wife's chair. No, she was pointing at the chair he was in, the chair not at the head of the table. Oh, he had believed he was the head of the table. He was wrong. He was so wrong. "You," she said, her gaze finally locking onto his, "are about to find out just how much I understand about business." Eleanor sat. It was a deliberate, regal movement. David Chen took the seat at her right, opening a laptop. "Ms. Vance," Michael Harrison began, his voice trembling. "I must apologize. I had no idea of this family connection. This is highly irregular." "The only family connection here, Mr. Harrison, is the one your Vice President of Acquisitions," she said the title with biting sarcasm, "has brought with him." Her eyes flicked to Amber, then back to Harrison. "I trust she's on the payroll. Her travel expenses must be considerable." Harrison turned a shade of puce. He looked at Richard with pure murder in his eyes. "Richard." Eleanor." "Please," Richard stammered, his hands shaking so badly he clasped them in his lap. "Listen, honey, this is a misunderstanding. This is Amber. She's just an assistant. She is wearing a $6,800 bracelet you purchased on the corporate American Express 2 days ago, Richard," Eleanor stated flatly. "You filed it under Client Gifts, Singapore Project. I suppose, in a way, she is a client." Amber's hand instinctively flew to the Cartier bracelet, her face pale with horror. "The Singapore Project," Eleanor continued, opening the sleek file from her briefcase, "which brings us to the core of the problem. Your division, Richard?" She slid the file across the polished mahogany table to Michael Harrison. "Page 1. The projections you, Mr. Harrison, have presented to my firm as the basis for this investment. They are based entirely on the Singapore deal, a supposed partnership with Asia Pac Holdings, correct?" Harrison nodded, wary. "It's Richard's flagship project. He's assured the board it's finalized." "Asia Pac Holdings," Eleanor said, "is a shell company registered in the Marshall Islands. It has no assets. It has no employees. It was founded 6 months ago by a— What's his name, David?" David Chen glanced at his screen. "A Mr. James Peterson." "Ah, yes." "Mr. James Peterson," Eleanor said. "An alias, Richard, that you first used in college to buy alcohol. You were never very creative. You created a fake company, pitched a fake deal to your own board, and have been siphoning development funds from Stratford to finance your travel and entertainment for the last 6 months, to the tune of $1.4 million. Harrison made a gagging sound. He started flipping through the file, his face growing paler with every page. He was looking at copies of wire transfers, forged signatures, and fake letterheads. This is, Harrison whispered. "This is fraud. It is, Eleanor agreed calmly. And it's the only thing keeping your company afloat. Stratford Industries is bankrupt. It has been for 9 months. You've just been hiding it. Richard finally found his voice. It was a pathetic, desperate squeak. You bitch! You've been spying on me. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Spying? Richard, you used your work email. You left your laptop open in a house I pay the mortgage on. That isn't spying. That's just reading. You were arrogant. You were sloppy. And you assumed I was stupid. She leaned forward. For 15 years you dismissed me. You told me I was over my head. You told me I wouldn't understand. You told me to handle the seating charts and the canapes while you, she smiled, a terrifying, mirthless expression, handled the high finance. So let me be very clear, in terms you will understand. She pointed a finger at Harrison. You, Mr. Harrison, have been derelict in your duties as CEO. You allowed this man, a gesture to Richard, to commit massive corporate fraud under your nose because you were too incompetent or too terrified to look. She then turned to Richard. And you are a thief, a common, pathetic thief. You didn't just steal from your company, you stole from me. I never stole from you, Richard yelled, his face turning a blotchy red. Really? Eleanor's voice was silk. The Amex Black you're so proud of. It's a corporate card, the corporation you've been defrauding, the apartment in the city, the one you've been using with her? Amber looked like she was about to be physically ill. It's leased in Stratford's name. The jewelry, the clothes, the dinners at places you can't afford. It was all stolen money. You are a parasite, Richard. And you've been living on a host that's been dead for almost a year. The sommelier entered at that moment, his timing impeccable. He was holding a bottle of 1998 Petrus. Ah, excellent, Eleanor said, her tone brightening for the first time. Right on time. The sommelier looked confused. Miss Vance, you asked for this. On ice? Yes, Eleanor said, holding his gaze. A bucket, just like you'd serve champagne. The sommelier, though clearly pained, did as he was told. He placed the legendary $20,000 bottle of wine into a silver bucket of ice. Richard, a supposed wine connoisseur, stared at the bottle in horror. You're chilling it? That's a 98. You'll destroy it. Eleanor looked at him, her eyes as cold as the ice bath. I know. You told me you were saving this exact bottle, Richard. You said you'd open it when you finally made it. When you closed the deal of a lifetime. Looks like that's tonight. She turned to the sommelier. Open it and pour a glass for Ms. Rawlings. She looks like she could use a drink. I'm sure she'll appreciate the gesture. The sommelier uncorked the bottle. The room filled with the scent of a dying masterpiece. He poured a glass and placed it in front of Amber. Amber just stared at the dark, ruined wine. Drink it, Eleanor ordered. Amber, trembling, picked up the glass. No, Richard shouted. Eleanor, stop this. This is insane. This is our life. You're destroying our life. No, Richard, Eleanor said, her voice dropping back to a whisper. I'm not. You did. You destroyed it when you lied. You destroyed it when you cheated. And you destroyed it when you underestimated me. I'm just settling the account. Richard was broken. He stared at his wife, the woman he had dismissed as a domestic accessory, and saw a stranger. He saw a queen on a chessboard who had just, in one move, taken his king, his queen, his rooks, and every pawn. What? What do you want? He whispered, his last shred of dignity gone. Money? Is that it? You want the house? Take it. Take it all. Just don't do this. Eleanor almost laughed. Want the house? Richard, you haven't owned the house in 48 hours. She slid the second, smaller file from her briefcase. It wasn't a corporate document. It was a deed. You've defaulted on the mortgage for 3 consecutive months. You've been scrambling, taking out high-interest loans against your non-existent Singapore deal to cover the payments. But you finally ran out of road. The bank was foreclosing. They were set to seize the property tomorrow morning. How do you know that? I know, Eleanor said, tapping the file. Because Vanguard Capital bought the note from the bank. I own your debt. I own the mortgage. I own the house. And as the new owner, I am giving you 24 hours to vacate the premises. My security team will be there at noon tomorrow to escort you out. You may take your clothes, your golf clubs, and that's all. Richard's world physically tilted. You bought my debt. You can't. I can, and I have, she said. The locks will be changed by 12:01 p.m. Your home, as you call it, is now an asset in my firm's real estate portfolio, and I assure you, it will be much more profitable without you in it. Michael Harrison, who had been silently reading the fraud report, finally spoke. His voice was a dead, hollow monotone. He's ruined. I'm ruined. The company is gone. Not necessarily, Eleanor said, a flicker of hope in Harrison's eyes. You mean the investment? You'll still— Good heavens, no, Eleanor scoffed. Invest in this toxic heap of fraud and incompetence? Absolutely not. Vanguard Capital doesn't invest in failures, Mr. Harrison. We acquire them. She looked at David, who spoke for the first time. Our team has prepared a tender offer. We will be acquiring Stratford Industries for pennies on the dollar. We will absorb your few tangible assets, your downtown building, primarily, and we will be dissolving the rest. We will take on your outstanding debt, and in exchange, the entire board, including you, Mr. Harrison, will tender your resignations, effective immediately. You're firing me? Harrison gasped. You're being given a graceful exit, Mr. Harrison, Eleanor corrected, which is more than you deserve. You will sign this non-disclosure agreement, and you will disappear quietly. If you do not, I will ensure the SEC report on your corporate negligence becomes the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Do you understand me? Harrison, a broken man, simply nodded, his jowls trembling. Now all eyes were on Richard. He was hyperventilating, his face a mask of sweat and terror. And me? He breathed. Eleanor, please, think of Thomas, our son. You can't send me to prison. Think of his name, his future. This was his last card. The child he had barely spoken to in months. Eleanor's expression, for the first time, hardened into something truly terrifying. The cold calculation was gone, replaced by a pure, white-hot rage that she had kept banked for a decade. She hissed, leaning across the table, am the only one who has ever thought of Thomas. You thought of him when you forged my name on a document to secure a loan against his college trust fund. Did you think I wouldn't find that? Richard stopped breathing. That had been his ultimate gamble. The one he was sure she'd never find. I found it, Richard. I found it, and I replaced the funds. My funds. This morning. You didn't just steal from me. You stole from our son. You would have seen him penniless to pay for her. Her gesture was so sharp, Amber flinched, as if she'd been slapped. This was the moment. The checkmate. Amber Rawlings finally understood. This wasn't a domestic dispute. This was an execution. She was tied to a man who was not just broke, not just fired, but a criminal. She was an accomplice. She stood up so fast her chair screeched on the floor. I didn't know. she cried, looking at Eleanor, pleading. He told me he was leaving you. He told me he was a big shot, that this deal was done. He used me. Eleanor looked at her, bored. Yes, he did. And you used him. It was a transaction. And your investment, I'm afraid, has just gone bust. Amber's face contorted with rage. She looked at Richard, this pathetic, sweating, ruined man. He wasn't her ticket. He was an anchor. With a scream of fury, she ripped the Cartier bracelet from her wrist. The delicate gold clasp snapped. She threw it at his face. It hit him in the cheek, leaving a small red mark. "You loser!" she shrieked. "You told me you were a king. You're nothing. You're a married, broke nothing." She grabbed her purse, knocked over the glass of ruined Petrus, and stormed out of the private dining room, leaving a trail of dark, expensive wine and cheap perfume. The room was silent again. Richard put his head in his hands. He began to sob. Not quiet, dignified tears, but ugly, heaving, gulping sobs of a child who has been truly, finally, caught. Eleanor watched him for a long, cold moment. She felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction, just the quiet, clean feeling of a long overdue equation finally being solved. "As for you, Richard," she said, standing up. "My husband." He looked up, his face a wreck. "Yes? You'll help me. For Thomas." "No," Eleanor said. "Mr. Harrison gets an exit. You do not. You committed fraud, not just against the company, but against me and against your son. You will not go to prison on my account. What Stratford Industries decides to do, however, is out of my hands." She looked at the terrified, weeping Michael Harrison. "Oh, wait. I am Stratford Industries. David?" David Chen slid a final document in front of Harrison. "This is a separation agreement. It includes a standard clause. The company agrees not to pursue criminal charges against you, Mr. Harrison, in exchange for your full cooperation and silence." "Thank you, God, thank you," Harrison mumbled. "There's a second signature line," David added. "For Mr. Vance." Richard looked. It was the same deal. Silence, resignation, and no criminal charges. You're letting me go?" Richard whispered, disbelieving. "I am not letting you go," Eleanor said. "I am cutting you loose. You get no severance. Your stocks are worthless. Your pension is void. The city apartment is gone. The house is gone. Your bank accounts, which were tied to your corporate fraud, will be frozen by morning. You will walk out of this restaurant with exactly what you have in your pockets. I am not sending you to prison. I am, however, taking everything else. You wanted to be free of your boring, domestic life? You're free, Richard." She picked up her briefcase. "David, please settle the bill, and make sure," she added, with a final, cutting glance at the melting ice bucket, "to charge the wine to Mr. Vance's now cancelled corporate account." She walked to the door. "Eleanor, wait!" Richard cried, scrambling from his chair. "Where will I go? What will I do? I have nothing." Eleanor paused at the door, her back to him. "You know, Richard, I asked myself that same question for 15 years. I was a wife, a mother, a pretty little head. I had nothing of my own. But I built an empire in your shadow." She turned, just enough to look at him over her shoulder. "You're a man. You're the big shot. You'll figure it out, or you won't. Frankly, your future is no longer an asset I'm interested in tracking." She left. The door clicked shut, leaving Richard and Harrison alone in the wreckage. The fallout was not loud. It was brutally, efficiently quiet. The next day, Richard Vance was not led out of Stratford Industries in handcuffs. There was no press, no scandal. He was simply gone. His name was removed from the digital directory before the market opened. His office was a cleared-out shell by 10 a.m. When he'd tried to enter the Greenwich house at 11 a.m., his key hadn't worked. A polite but immovable man in a black suit had informed him that this was private property and handed him a single banker's box of his personal effects. He tried to call his friends, his contacts. No one picked up. The news that Vanguard had acquired Stratford and dissolved the board had spread through their circle like wildfire. Richard wasn't just a pariah, he was a liability. He was a cautionary tale. By nightfall, Richard Vance, the man who had worn Brioni suits and boasted about his Macallan, was sleeping on the sofa of a college acquaintance in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens. Eleanor, meanwhile, was at work. The 68th floor of the Stratford building was being gutted. The dark mahogany and leather of Harrison's regime were being replaced with glass, steel, and light. Eleanor, or rather Ms. Vance, stood in the center of her new, cavernous office, looking out at the skyline of Manhattan. It was the view Richard had always coveted. David Chen walked in, holding a tablet. The restructuring is complete. We've salvaged the real estate division and the biotech patents. The rest was dead weight. We're already in the black. Good, Eleanor said, her voice calm. Start the interviews for the new CEO. I want a woman. Someone with a background in forensic accounting. Someone who's been underestimated. Already have a short list, David smiled. And this came for you. From your son. He handed her a small, express-mailed package. Eleanor's professional mask softened instantly. She opened it. Inside was a framed photo of her and a 17-year-old Thomas laughing at a baseball game 2 summers ago. Tucked into the frame was a note written in his familiar, messy script. Mum, heard about the restructuring. Dad called me. He sounded different. I don't know all the details, but I know you, and I know you finally did what you had to do. I'm proud of you. I'll be home for Thanksgiving. Can't wait. Love, Thomas. Eleanor closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a line through her makeup. It was not a tear of sadness, it was release. The one person whose opinion truly mattered understood. She had saved his future. She had saved their future. Ms. Vance? David asked, his voice gentle. Are you all right? She wiped the tear away, her composure instantly returning. I'm excellent, David. Thank you. What's next? The Financial Times, he said, tapping his tablet. They're desperate for an interview with the mystery woman of Vanguard. They want to know who Eve Vance is, where you came from, what your secret is. Eleanor looked out the window again. The city was hers. The building was hers. Her life was hers. All right, she said. Book it. It's time the world stopped guessing. 3 weeks later, the article was published. The cover of the magazine showed Eleanor, not in a severe suit, but in a simple, elegant navy blue dress. She was smiling, but her eyes were appraising, intelligent, and utterly in command. The reporter had asked the inevitable question. Ms. Vance, you came out of nowhere. You've taken this industry by storm. You were a homemaker in Greenwich. How did you build this empire in complete secrecy? Eleanor's answer was the quote that would be repeated in boardrooms for years to come. I didn't come out of nowhere, she'd said, her voice smooth as velvet. I was always there. My secret wasn't complex. It was simple. I was underestimated. I was the wife. I was the woman in the room who everyone assumed was thinking about the dinner menu. They saw what they wanted to see. They never bothered to look deeper. They never saw the architect in the silence. She'd leaned forward, giving the reporter the money shot. Men like my husband, they see the world as their personal kingdom. They forget that the person who runs the household, manages the schedules and balances the books, is the one who really knows where all the bodies are buried. They thought my world was small. They didn't realize I was just using the quiet to build a new one. The final shot of the article was of her, alone, walking through the new, bustling floor of her company. She was E. Vance. She was Eleanor. She was, for the first time in her life, completely, powerfully, and unapologetically whole. And she had never looked back. And just like that, Eleanor Vance proved that the most dangerous person in the room is always the one everyone overlooks. She didn't just get revenge. She reclaimed her name, her power, and her future, all in one devastating financial masterpiece. Richard learned the hard way that you should never, ever underestimate the woman you betrayed. What do you think of Eleanor's ultimate checkmate? Was it too harsh, or was it exactly the justice Richard and Amber deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of long-awaited justice, please give this video a like and share it with someone who appreciates a powerful comeback. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story of truth and consequences. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. What happens when the ultimate betrayal happens in front of the whole world? He was Julian Vance, a New York real estate billionaire. She was his silent, beautiful wife, Emma. But at the city's most-watched charity ball, Julian didn't just ignore his wife. He publicly, passionately kissed his new mistress, Sophia, for every camera to see. The humiliation was total. The world watched Emma's life crumble, but they all forgot one crucial detail, a secret Emma had kept for 10 years. Julian may have run the company, but Emma owned it. And the gavel was about to come down. The ballroom at the Pierre Hotel was suffocating. It wasn't the heat, the air conditioning was a precise, Arctic chill that carried the scent of 1,000 white roses. It was the weight of the diamond necklace, a generous anniversary gift from Julian, which felt more like a beautiful, glittering leash. The weight of the custom-made, midnight blue Carolina Herrera gown, a color Julian had called subtle and appropriate. And most of all, the weight of being Mrs. Emma Vance. Emma Vance was, to the world, the luckiest woman in New York. A decade ago, she was a quiet, bookish nobody. Then she'd captured the attention of Julian Vance, the most ambitious, charismatic, and ruthless real estate developer in the city. He had built Vance Capital from nothing, a story he told often, into a $10 billion empire. Emma, with her quiet grace and whisper-thin figure, was the perfect accessory. She chaired the right charities, spoke only when spoken to, and looked exquisite on his arm. Tonight was the annual Metropolitan Children's Fund Gala. It was, in theory, Emma's event. She was the chairwoman. But as Julian took the stage, the spotlight followed him, as if drawn by a magnet. "We all have a duty," Julian boomed, his voice, like polished steel, filling the room. He flashed his famous predatory smile. "A duty to build, a duty to succeed, and when you succeed, a duty to give back." The room, filled with New York's old money and new tech, erupted in applause. Emma clapped softly, her smile as practiced and perfect as the pearls on the woman next to her. She watched her husband. He was a magnificent creature, all sharp angles, expensive tailoring, and blinding confidence. He looked every bit the king of the city. But kings get careless. Emma had felt the shift 6 months ago. It wasn't a sudden storm. It was a change in the air, a drop in barometric pressure. It was the way Julian suddenly started guarding his phone, angling the screen away from her even though she'd never shown the slightest interest in it. It was the new, unfamiliar scent on his cashmere sweaters. Not her perfume, but something musky, expensive, and invasive. It was the whispers. "He's a titan," a voice drifted over from a nearby table, where a skeletal socialite was leaning into a gossip columnist. But that new VP of his, Sophia Dubois, she's the one with the killer instinct. They say she's the reason they closed the Hudson Yards deal. They say a lot of things about her, the columnist purred, his eyes finding Julian on stage. She's brilliant and devastating. Emma's hand, resting on the white linen tablecloth, tightened. Sophia Dubois. The name had been a constant in her house for months. Sophia closed the deal. Sophia reorganized the marketing division. Sophia works as hard as I do. Emma had done her own, quiet research. Sophia was indeed devastating. She was a tall, flame-haired Wharton graduate with a social media presence as sharp and curated as her cheekbones. Her feed was a mix of brutalist architecture, high fashion, and just enough candid shots in the Vance Capital boardroom to signal her importance. Julian finished his speech, and the applause was deafening. He descended the stage, not walking back to Emma's table, but being intercepted, absorbed by a crowd of admirers. Emma watched him laugh, that big, performative laugh, and clap a rival developer on the back. Her phone vibrated silently in her clutch. A simple one-line text from a number saved as AG. The accounts are balanced. The Event Horizon provision is confirmed secure. Emma read the message once. A single, almost imperceptible breath left her. She typed a one-word reply. Acknowledged. She looked up. Across the ballroom, Julian had finally found his way to Sophia Dubois. Sophia, in a daring, crimson gown that left nothing to the imagination, was looking up at him, not as an employee, but as a predator sizing up prey. She laughed, touching his forearm. It was a gesture of casual intimacy that screamed possession. Emma picked up her water glass, the crystal cool against her skin. The weight of her dress, the diamonds, the name. It was all still there. But it was no longer a cage. It was armor. She was the quiet wife, the subtle accessory, the woman who was never, ever a threat. And as she watched her husband and his mistress hold court in the center of the room, Emma Vance realized, with a chilling calm, that they had all made a terrible, terrible mistake. They thought she was just the wife of the man who ran the company. They had no idea that she was the woman who owned it. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in subtle psychological warfare. The event Julian and Sophia were circling wasn't some hidden, sordid affair. It was the Vance Capital 10th Anniversary Innovation Ball. It was, by all accounts, Julian's masterpiece. He was planning to unveil his legacy project, a multi-billion-dollar smart city complex that would redefine the New York skyline. It was his name on the invitations, his face on the cover of Forbes that month, anticipating the announcement. Emma's preparations were quieter. "Mr. Graves," she said, her voice soft in the soundproofed study of her private Upper East Side brownstone, a property Julian didn't even know she owned. This wasn't their shared penthouse. This was her sanctuary, her real office. Arthur Graves, AG, was a man who seemed to be carved from granite. He had been her father's chief counsel, and now he was hers. He was the only person alive who knew the full truth. "Emma," he replied, his voice a gravelly monotone. He never called her Mrs. Vance. The board of Ethelred Holdings is concerned. Ethelred Holdings is me, Arthur, Emma said, turning from the window. And I am concerned. But not about the stock price. I'm concerned about the rot. The rot, Mr. Vance, is about to announce the legacy project, Graves said, adjusting his glasses. A project funded entirely by Ethelred, funneled through 3 shell corporations, and presented as his own. If he craters, we take the hit. He is going to crater, Emma said. He's arrogant, he's sloppy, and he's in love, or whatever he calls it, with a woman who is just as arrogant and sloppy as he's become. He thinks he's the sun, and he's about to fly right into it. So what do we do? Arthur asked. We do nothing, Emma said. We let him. We let him fly. We let him reach for the sky. And when he's at the very, very peak, I will hand him the bill for the wax. She turned back to the window. I need you to be ready, Arthur. The Event Horizon Protocol. I want it loaded. I want the termination for cause documents drawn up. I want the asset seizure warrants filed and sealed, ready to be executed on my command. That's scorched earth, Emma, Graves said, the closest he'd ever come to surprise. That's what's left after a wildfire, Arthur, she replied, and I am standing in the ashes. At their penthouse, the glass and chrome box Julian called home, the tension was thick enough to cut. The Innovation Ball is everything, Emma, Julian said, pacing in front of his closet, which was the size of a studio apartment. He was already in his tuxedo shirt, the diamond studs winking. This isn't one of your charity things. This is legacy. I'm aware, Julian, you've mentioned it. Emma was at her own vanity, applying a neutral, unassuming lipstick. I need you. Polished tonight, he said, not looking at her. Simple. Elegant. The board from Tokyo is flying in. The mayor will be there. I don't want distractions. Distractions, she repeated, her voice flat. Yes, just be the perfect hostess. Smile, shake hands, and let me handle the important conversations. He finally turned, his eyes landing on her. And wear the blue. The one I like. The blue, she said. Yes. Not that loud red thing you bought last week. Emma's gaze was unblinking. I didn't buy a red dress, Julian. He frowned, annoyed. Whatever, just be ready. The car is here in 20. He swept out of the room, already on his phone. Sophia, make sure the press packets have the new rendering. Emma stared at her reflection. She hadn't bought a red dress, but she knew, with the certainty of the sun rising, who had. She picked up her phone and sent a new text to Arthur Graves. Add Sophia Dubois to the termination protocol. Cause, conspiracy to defraud a primary stakeholder, acknowledged. Emma stood up. She looked at the midnight blue dress Julian had laid out for her. Then she walked to the back of her closet, to a garment bag she had picked up that afternoon. Julian wanted simple. He wanted subtle. He wanted his wife to be a shadow. She unzipped the bag. Inside was a dress the color of ice, a blinding, glittering, custom-made Oscar de la Renta that didn't just enter a room. It conquered it. He wants a distraction, she whispered to her reflection. He's about to get one. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was transformed. The Great Hall, usually reserved for ancient relics, was now a monument to modern ego. Giant screens projections of Vance Capital swept across the Egyptian temple walls. The air thrummed with a string quartet playing a modern, edgy rendition of a Vivaldi concerto. When Julian and Emma Vance arrived, a phalanx of paparazzi exploded in a blinding wall of light. Julian, as always, soaked it in. He put his arm around Emma's waist, a possessive, proprietary gesture. But the narrative shifted. The whispers from the press line were different tonight. "It's Emma! Mrs. Vance! Look at that dress!" Emma, in her ice-white, shimmering gown, looked less like a shadow and more like a queen. The diamonds at her throat weren't a leash, they were a warning. She smiled, a small, knowing smile, and let Julian guide her inside, but she was the one they were all watching. Julian felt it. He gripped her waist tighter, his smile stiffening. "That's quite the dress, Emma. A bit much, don't you think?" "Is it?" she murmured, detaching herself from his grasp to take a champagne flute from a passing waiter. I felt it was appropriate for an anniversary. She drifted into the crowd, a vision in white, leaving him standing at the entrance, frowning. The party was a sea of Julian's success. The mayor was there, as promised, the investors from Tokyo, reserved and watchful. And then there was Sophia Dubois. She had, indeed, worn red. It was a staggering, audacious, blood-red column of silk that was practically painted on. Her flame-colored hair was slicked back, her lips painted the same, shocking red. She was a declaration of war, and she was standing next to Julian's legacy project model, holding court as if she were the hostess. Emma watched from a distance. She saw the glances, the whispers, the way Julian and Sophia kept finding each other, their bodies aligned, their heads bent together. They were a power couple, radiating energy, and Emma was, once again, relegated to the role of the wife. The time came for the main event. Julian mounted the custom-built stage, the applause thundering. "Tonight," he began, his voice emotional, "we're not just celebrating 10 years of success. We're celebrating the future, a future I built." Emma, standing near the back, felt a coldness creep into her veins. "A future I built." "I couldn't have done it alone," Julian continued. He thanked the mayor. He thanked the board. And then he smiled, his gaze locking on the red dress in the front row. "But vision is nothing without a catalyst, without someone who shares that fire, someone who sees the world the way you do. Please join me in thanking the brilliant, the visionary, Ms. Sophia Dubois." The spotlight swung to Sophia. She looked triumphant. She walked toward the stage. And then the unthinkable happened. It wasn't a handshake. It wasn't a polite hug. Julian, high on his own ego and the roar of the crowd, reached down. Sophia, her eyes locked on his, met him at the steps. In front of 200 guests, the mayor of New York, the international press, and his wife. Julian Vance pulled Sophia Dubois into his arms and kissed her. It wasn't a peck. It was a deep, passionate, Hollywood-level kiss. The flashbulbs didn't just pop, they exploded. The room went utterly silent, the only sound the click, click, click of a dozen cameras capturing the moment. Emma didn't move. She didn't gasp. She didn't faint. She simply stood, her face a pale, beautiful mask, and watched. She watched the man she had once loved, the man she had created, publicly and brutally humiliate her. She saw Sophia's hand snake around Julian's neck, a gesture of pure, triumphant possession. A single reporter, braver than the rest, turned his camera from the stage to Emma. The flash was blinding. He captured the image that would be on the cover of the Post the next day. The perfect, ice-cold wife, watching her own life detonate. The kiss ended. Julian, dazed, looked out at the silent crowd. Sophia, her lipstick barely smeared, looked directly, intentionally at Emma. It was a smile of pure victory. Emma held her gaze. Then, with a calm that was more terrifying than any scream, Emma Vance set her champagne flute down on a waiter's tray, turned, and walked out of the great hall. She didn't run. She walked. Every step was measured, her back ramrod straight. The perfect wife had left the building. Julian didn't come home. The digital clock on Emma's nightstand flipped to 4:17 a.m. The silence of the penthouse was absolute. The ice dress was puddled on the floor of her dressing room, a glittering snakeskin she had shed. Emma was in a simple, grey silk robe, sitting in the dark, looking out over the city that never slept. Her city. Her phone, which had been vibrating incessantly for hours with texts from concerned friends and calls from Julian, which she'd silenced, lit up with a single message from Arthur Graves. "Are you all right?" It was the most personal thing he'd ever asked her. He kissed her, in front of everyone. The post is already online. "The Vance and the Vamp." A moment later, Graves replied, "The protocol. Is it engaged?" Emma's thumb hovered over the screen. This was the final button. There was no going back from this. She thought of the 10 years of work, of building Julian up, of believing in the man he could be. She thought of the look on Sophia's face, that smug, reptilian victory. She thought of the kiss, the arrogance, the public execution. "Engage it," she typed. "Full event horizon. Seize the assets. Freeze the accounts. Terminate the leases. I want him to wake up tomorrow morning with nothing but his arrogance." "It will be done," Graves replied. "The board of Ethelred meets at 9:00 a.m. They will ratify the vote. Security has been dispatched to the Vance Capital headquarters. They will secure the servers by 6:00 a.m. "And Arthur," Emma typed. "Yes? Make sure they change the locks on the executive washroom." Emma turned off the phone. She felt nothing. Not sadness, not even anger. Just a profound, cold emptiness that was rapidly filling with resolve. The sun was just breaking over the East River when the penthouse door finally hissed open. Julian stumbled in, his tuxedo tie undone, his hair a mess. He stank of Sophia's perfume. He saw Emma sitting in the dim morning light, and he actually, visibly, flinched. The bravado of the night before was gone, replaced by a pasty, hungover fear. "Emma," he started, his voice hoarse. "Look, about last night." "Don't," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. It happened so fast. The energy, the crowd, Sophia. "Her name," Emma said, standing up, "is the last thing I ever want to hear you say." "Emma, listen to me." He tried to grab her arm, his old, bullish tactic. She stepped back, and his hand fell on empty air. "You have to understand. This is passion. This is real. What you and I have. It's comfortable. It's a partnership. But this—" "A partnership," she repeated, nodding slowly. "Yes, that's what we were." A wave of relief washed over his face. He mistook her calm for weakness, for acceptance. "Exactly. And I'll take care of you. I'm not a monster. You'll get the penthouse, the Hamptons house. A very, very generous allowance. You'll never have to work a day in your life." He was already dividing the assets, assuming they were his to divide. "You're giving me the penthouse?" she asked, tilting her head. "Of course. And the driver. Just don't fight me on this, Emma. Don't make it ugly. My lawyers will draft the papers. We can call it irreconcilable differences. It'll be clean." "My lawyer," Emma said, walking toward her dressing room, "is Arthur Graves." Julian laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. "Graves? Your father's old probate lawyer? Emma, don't be naive. He's a fossil. He's no match for my team. He'll be eaten alive. Just take the deal." Emma paused at the doorway. She looked back at him, at the King of New York, standing in her living room, his shirt stained with another woman's lipstick. "You're right, Julian," she said softly. "He's not your lawyer's match. He's so far above them. They're not even in the same game." She closed the door. He heard the click of the lock. Julian, annoyed but relieved, poured himself a stiff bourbon. He thought the worst was over. He thought he had won. He called his head of security. "Yeah, Mark, I'm going to be working from home today. Lock down the executive floor. I don't want anyone bothering me. Except Ms. Dubois, of course. Let her up." There was a pause. Mr. Vance?" "What?" Julian snapped. My keycard isn't working." "What do you mean it's not working? It's a gold-level pass." "No, sir. I mean, the building isn't working. There are men here, in suits. They're not our guys. They're Ethelred holding security. They're changing the locks, sir." Julian's blood ran cold. "Ethelred, the holding company. Why are they— Get them on the phone. Get their man in charge on the phone right now." To understand the beauty of what was happening at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, you have to understand the lie Julian Vance had been living for 10 years. Emma's father, Arthur Blackwood, had not been a probate lawyer. He had been a phantom, a quiet, unassuming tech and real estate genius who founded Ethelred Holdings in the 1980s. He bought land, patents, and entire city blocks, then hid them behind layers of LLCs and trusts. He hated the spotlight. When he died, he left his only child, Emma, not just a fortune, but an empire. Emma, then 23, had a choice. She could have become the billionaire heiress on the cover of magazines. But she was her father's daughter. She wanted a low profile, and she wanted a partner, someone who wouldn't be intimidated by her. She met Julian Vance when he was a junior analyst with a lot of charm and a failing startup. He had no idea who she was. He just saw a beautiful, quiet woman. She saw his raw ambition and his hunger. She decided to run an experiment. She gave him a seed loan. Family money, she'd called it. She let him found Vance Capital. What he never knew was that the company was founded as a 100% majority-owned subsidiary of Ethelred Holdings. He was never the owner. He was never the founder. He was and had always been the CEO, an employee. Every brilliant deal he'd closed, it was Ethelred's money. Every building he'd acquired, it was Ethelred's property, leased back to Vance Capital at a friendly rate. His entire empire, his name on the building, his private jet, his legacy project, was all built on a foundation owned by the woman he'd just told to take the penthouse. And the prenup. Julian had insisted on one, to protect his future wealth. Emma's lawyers, led by Arthur Graves, chief counsel of Ethelred, were only too happy to draft it. It was an ironclad document that stated in no uncertain terms that in the event of a divorce, all assets acquired before and during the marriage would be divided based on verified original ownership. Julian had signed it with a smirk, thinking he was protecting himself from a gold digger. He had just signed his own death warrant. The Event Horizon Protocol was a tiny buried clause in Julian's 200-page CEO employment contract, a contract he'd been too arrogant to read. It stated that if the CEO, Julian, committed any act of gross public misconduct or moral turpitude that threatened the reputation of the parent company, Ethelred, the board could terminate his contract for cause, effective immediately. Forfeiture for cause meant he'd lost everything: salary, bonuses, severance, and, most importantly, his non-vested stock options. The public, passionate kiss with an employee at a company-sponsored event, which was now on the cover of every newspaper in the Western world. That, Arthur Graves would argue, was the very definition of gross public misconduct. The 9 a.m. board meeting wasn't a meeting. It was a formality. It consisted of Emma as sole stakeholder, signing a single document presented by Arthur Graves. I, Emma Blackwood Vance, chairwoman and sole owner of Ethelred Holdings, do hereby ratify the termination of Julian Vance, CEO of the subsidiary Vance Capital, for cause, effective immediately. The empire fell with the scratch of a pen. Julian was in a full-blown panic. His phone was a brick. His email had bounced back with a user unknown error. The private elevator to his office? Access denied. He had actually taken a taxi, to the Vance Capital Tower, the glass and steel monument to his own ego. He stormed into the lobby, his face crimson. "I am Julian Vance. You will let me up to my office," he roared at the new security guards in the lobby. They were big, calm men, with Ethelred on their lapels. "Mr. Vance, sir, your name is not on the access list," the lead guard said, his voice polite but final. "I am the access list," Julian bellowed. "No, sir, you are not." Just then, the elevator doors chimed. Sophia Dubois arrived, looking flustered, but triumphant. She was wearing a sharp white power suit, ready for her first day as the unofficial new Mrs. Vance. "Julian, darling, what's going on? My driver's corporate card was declined," she said, annoyance in her voice. Then she saw the guards. "What is this?" "These thugs won't let me up to my own office," Julian said, grabbing her arm. "Don't be ridiculous," Sophia scoffed. She marched to the lead guard. "I am Sophia Dubois, Executive Vice President. These guards are fired. Call your supervisor. Now." The guard looked at a tablet in his hand. "Ah, yes. Ms. Dubois, we have a packet for you." He handed her a simple manila envelope. Sophia ripped it open, a smug look on her face. Her expression changed as she read. Her face went from smug to confused, then to ashen white. Inside was a single-page letter. It informed her that her employment with Vance Capital was terminated, effective immediately, for violations of the company's code of conduct and conspiracy to defraud. It also informed her that the company-leased apartment she lived in would need to be vacated in 24 hours. A bill for misappropriated corporate assets, including designer clothing, flights, and the red dress she'd worn last night, all charged to the company Amex, was attached. This is a joke," she whispered, the paper trembling in her hand. "Julian, what is this? What is Ethelred?" Julian was saying, his voice cracking. "They're just our silent partners. They're a holding company. They can't do this." "Actually," a voice said, "they can." Arthur Graves walked through the lobby doors, flanked by 2 more Ethelred guards. He looked like a very distinguished, very expensive undertaker. "Mr. Vance, Miss Dubois," Graves said, his voice flat. "You are trespassing on private property." "Private property!" Julian shrieked. "This is my building. I built this." "No, Mr. Vane," Graves corrected him. "You were employed in this building, a building owned by Ethelred Holdings. As of 9:01 a.m. this morning, your employment, and that of Miss Dubois, was terminated. For cause." The "for cause" hit Julian like a physical blow. You can't. The board will never approve this. I am the board." "You were the chairman of the subsidiary board, Mr. Vance," Graves said, checking his watch. "A board that was dissolved by its sole shareholder this morning. Security will now escort you both off the premises. Any attempt to re-enter will be unfortunate." The guard stepped forward. "No!" Sophia suddenly found her voice. It was raw and ugly. "You can't. Julian is the most powerful man in this city. He'll sue you. He'll sue Ethelred. We'll own that company." Julian, for the first time, looked utterly defeated. He knew, deep down, the power of Ethelred. He had just never known who they were. "Who?" he whispered, looking at Graves. Who is Ethelred? Who did this? Arthur Graves looked past Julian toward the main entrance. The glass doors swished open. I did. Emma Vance walked into the lobby. The transformation was absolute. The ice dress from last night was gone, replaced by a razor-sharp, custom black Tom Ford pantsuit. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, powerful chignon. Her face was pale, composed, and utterly terrifying in its calmness. She wasn't Mrs. Vance. She was Emma Blackwood. She was flanked by her own security team. Julian's jaw went slack. The blood drained from his face. He looked from Emma to Arthur Graves, and back to Emma. The math, as simple as it was devastating, was finally adding up in his head. "Emma," he said. His voice was a pathetic croak. Sophia, however, was still in fight mode. "Oh, look," she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "The wronged wife came to cry. Did you come to beg for your allowance, darling? I'm afraid Julian and I are liquidating." Emma didn't even look at her. Her eyes were locked on Julian. "You," Julian whispered, pointing a shaking finger. It was you. Your father. Probate." "My father," Emma said, her voice clear and cold, echoing in the marble lobby, "was Arthur Blackwood, founder and sole owner of Ethelred Holdings, and as his sole heir, I am Ethelred Holdings." The confession hung in the air, a grenade with the pin pulled. Sophia's face crumpled. No, that's not possible." "I own this building," Emma continued, taking a step forward. Julian took a step back. "I own the land it's built on. I own the chair in your office, the jet you flew in last week, and the watch on your wrist. All of it. Property of Ethelred, leased to a CEO who was too arrogant to read his own contract." Julian was hyperventilating. The prenup, The prenup," Emma almost smiled. "Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. Arthur, did you bring the prenup?" Graves stepped forward and produced the document. "It's quite clear, Mr. Vance. All assets revert to their verified original ownership. Since all your assets were, in fact, my client's assets, you are left with exactly what you had when you met her." Julian's mind reeled back. 10 years ago, a failing startup, a $2,000 suit. You get nothing," Emma said. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. "You are not entitled to the penthouse because I bought it with Ethelred funds. You are not entitled to the Hamptons house, or the cars, or the art. You are, per the moral turpitude clause you violated last night, not even entitled to a severance." She finally turned her gaze to Sophia. Sophia, who had been frozen in horror, visibly recoiled. "And you, Ms. Dubois," Emma said, her voice dropping to an arctic whisper. "You thought you were sleeping with the king. You were sleeping with a middle manager, a very, very well-paid middle manager, but a clerk, nonetheless." I will sue you," Sophia shrieked. "Wrongful termination, harassment." "Please do," Arthur Graves chimed in, handing her a second envelope. "This is a copy of the criminal complaint we are filing with the SEC, detailing your conspiracy to use Mr. Vance's revoked authority to defraud the parent company. I believe the term is wire fraud. And this," he handed her a tablet, "is the security footage from Julian's office, where you are authorizing the use of corporate funds for your legacy project media campaign. A campaign that was, in fact, a PR blitz for your personal relationship. I believe my fossil of a legal team will quite enjoy discovery." Sophia looked at the evidence, then at Emma. She saw no mercy. She saw no anger. She saw nothing, just the black, cold void of a problem being solved. Sophia dropped the tablet. She turned and ran, her heels clacking on the marble, out of the building and out of their lives. Now, it was just Julian and Emma. "Emma!" he pleaded, his voice breaking. He held his hands out. "Baby, please, I didn't know. It was a mistake. A test. It was a stupid mistake." "It was," Emma agreed. "Your mistake was thinking I was an accessory. I was never the accessory, Julian. I was the architect." She stepped past him. You can't just leave me with nothing," he yelled, his voice cracking with desperation. "After 10 years, I loved you. I worked for you." Emma paused, her back to him. She turned her head just slightly. "No, Julian. You didn't work for me. You worked for my company, and your performance has been found lacking. Security." The Ethelred guards, who had been waiting patiently, stepped forward. They each took one of Julian's arms. "This is assault," he screamed, as they began to physically drag him toward the revolving doors. "I'm Julian Vance. You can't do this to me. I'll tell the press. Emma, please." Emma watched as the man who had been the King of New York was unceremoniously dumped on the sidewalk of the building that used to bear his name. The Vance Capital sign high above them was already being prepped for removal. She turned to Arthur Graves. "Mr. Graves, have the sign taken down by noon, and let's rebrand. I'm partial to my father's original name." "Blackwood Innovations," Graves said, with the hint of a smile. "It has a certain integrity." "Yes," Emma said, walking toward the elevator. "It does. I'll be in my office." The elevator doors chimed, and Emma Blackwood, ascended to her throne. The day after the lobby confrontation was not just a news story, it was a seismic event. The city, which had feasted on the story of the scandalous kiss, was now served a far richer, more complex, and infinitely more satisfying meal. The New York Post, having scrambled to pull its vamp story, now blared a headline that would become iconic. "The King is dead. Long live the Queen. How Silent Wife, Emma Blackwood, built and destroyed an empire." The story was everywhere. It wasn't just a tabloid sensation, it was a financial earthquake. The Wall Street Journal ran a sober, stunned analysis, titled "The Ethelred Ghost: How Vance Capital Was a 10-Year, 10B Decoy." Forbes, which had put Julian's face on its cover only a month prior, rushed out a digital issue. The stealth billionaire, Emma Blackwood, just taught a masterclass in corporate governance. The narrative, once a simple tale of a foolish wife and a cheating husband, was instantly rewritten. Emma was not the wronged woman. She was the architect, the phantom, the ice queen. Feminist blogs and financial gurus alike lionized her. Vogue ran a think piece titled "The Power of the Pantsuit," analyzing her walk into the lobby as a declaration of war and a new uniform for the woman who has had enough. She was, in an instant, not just powerful, but a global symbol of quiet, terrifying competence. But while the world was reading about the new queen, the old court was in ruins. Julian Vance had not slept. He wasn't at the penthouse. His key fob hadn't even worked in the elevator. He wasn't at a 5-star hotel. His Amex Centurion card, his black card, his identity, had been declined with a quiet, digital beep of finality. He was in a sterile, $250 a night room at a Midtown Holiday Inn, a room he'd paid for with the last of the cash in his wallet. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, the cheap comforter scratching his skin, watching his own execution on CNN. He saw Emma, in that black pantsuit, striding into his lobby. He saw himself, a madman being dragged out, his face a mask of crimson, screaming his own name like a curse. "It's a lie," he muttered, the remote in his hand. He clicked to Fox Business. A panel was dissecting the Event Horizon clause. "It's a brilliant, brutal piece of legal work," one analyst said. "He violated the morality clause in front of the entire world. She didn't just divorce him, she fired him." "It's theft," Julian roared at the screen. "It's my company. I built it." He grabbed his phone. His contacts. They were all there. The most powerful men and women in New York. He would fight this. He would build an army. He called David Meacham, his personal lawyer, the shark, who had drafted the prenup. "Julian!" David's voice was clipped, nervous. I can't talk." "What do you mean you can't talk?" Julian yelled. "She's stealing it. She's stealing everything. We're suing her. We're suing Ethelred. We're taking her to the cleaners. You said the prenup was ironclad." It is, Julian," Meacham said, his voice dropping. "It protects verified original ownership. And, Julian, I've seen the incorporation documents. They were just sent over by Ethelred's counsel. You don't have any original ownership. You were a CEO, a W-2 employee. You founded Vance Capital as a 100% subsidiary of Ethelred Holdings. Julian, she funded your startup. It was always hers." The phone felt slick in Julian's hand. No, that's not... We... And Julian, Meacham said, the final nail. "I can no longer represent you. Your retainer agreement was with Vance Capital. Since you are no longer an agent of that company, and, frankly, since Ethelred's counsel has sent a cease and desist to my entire firm, we're dropping you. Conflict of interest. Goodbye, Julian." The line went dead. He tried others. His friends from the club, his rivals on the board. No one picked up. Voicemails. "User not found." He was an unperson. He was radioactive, a primal scream of rage and terror built in his chest. He threw the phone. It shattered against the wall, opposite a generic, framed print of a rowboat. He had one last card, one last, desperate play. He used the hotel phone to call the only person who would still profit from his misery, the gossip columnist from the Post who had been at the gala. 2 hours later, they were in the hotel's dim, empty bar. The columnist, a man named Marcus, nursed a club soda, a small recorder on the table. "She's a monster," Julian spat, his hands shaking. He hadn't shaved. "She's a black widow. She planned this. For 10 years. She's inhuman. She let me build it, just to take it away. She's the one who had the affair, you know. With Graves. I'm sure of it." Marcus just nodded, his eyes gleaming. "This is good, Julian. This is gold. The Ice Queen's betrayal. Keep talking." "I'm talking," Julian said, leaning in. "About my story, my book, my movie. I'll tell everyone the truth." "I'm afraid you won't be, Mr. Vance." A new voice, calm and cold, cut through the bar. Julian and Marcus turned. A young man in a perfectly tailored, uncreased suit stood there. He looked about 25, but his eyes were ancient. He worked for Arthur Graves. "Who the hell are you?" Julian snapped. The young man didn't answer. He simply placed a single, folded document on the table in front of Julian and tapped it. "What is this?" Julian unfolded it. "That," the young lawyer said, "is Appendix F, Section 3, of your CEO employment contract, the non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement. It is comprehensive. It states, in short, that you may not discuss Ethelred Holdings, Blackwood Innovations, or any member of its board, which includes Emma Blackwood, in any public or private forum for perpetuity." "Or what?" Julian scoffed, though his heart was hammering. "Or," the lawyer said, "you will be liable for liquidated damages to the sum of, and I quote, $500 million. My firm has been instructed to monitor all media outlets. If a single word of Mr. Vance's story appears in print, we will file the suit. And we will win. We always do." The lawyer looked at Marcus. "And you, sir, you are now a party to a potential tortious interference. I would advise you to delete that recording." Marcus, who had faced down angry celebrities and mob lawyers, fumbled with his recorder and hit delete. He was terrified. "Good day, gentlemen." The young lawyer turned and left. Julian stared at the paper. It was a prison. He wasn't just ruined. He was silenced. He had no money, no company, no friends, and not even a story to sell. He was a ghost. He had been completely and totally erased. Sophia Dubois, on the other hand, was not the type to be erased. She was a fighter. She was a vamp. And she was, in her own mind, the real victim. She had spent 48 hours burning through her remaining credit lines, assembling a dream team of lawyers. She was suing for wrongful termination, sexual harassment. Emma created a hostile environment and emotional distress. She was going to own Emma Blackwood. Her day in court, or rather, a sterile deposition room, came 3 weeks later. She walked in wearing a dark, modest suit, her fiery hair pulled back. She was playing the part of the serious, wronged professional. Emma was not there. Of course not. Only Arthur Graves, flanked by his new, young associate. "Ms. Dubois?" Graves began, his voice a gravelly monotone. "Let's not waste time. You allege wrongful termination." "I was the top-performing executive at Vance Capital," Sophia said, her voice clear and practiced. "I was fired out of personal spite by a jealous, unhinged woman." An unhinged woman who, as sole stakeholder, had every right to dissolve the board and clean house, Graves countered. "But let's talk about your performance. Were you, or were you not, in a sexual relationship with your direct superior, CEO Julian Vance?" My personal life is not relevant." "It is," Graves said, sliding a file across the table. "When you use that personal life to defraud the company. This is a copy of the SEC complaint we filed yesterday. Let's turn to Exhibit AR. He produced a printout. "This is your corporate Amex statement. On it, you billed, let's see, a custom red Carolina Herrera gown for $14,000. The description you filed with accounting was client entertainment and networking. Ms. Dubois, who were you entertaining?" Sophia's face paled. Julian approved all my expenses. Which brings us to Exhibit B. Graves continued, relentless. "A wire transfer, authorized by you, for $250,000 from the Legacy Project marketing budget. This money was sent to Sophia PR, a shell company incorporated in Delaware, and owned by your sister. That was for a media blitz." "A media blitz," Graves said, sliding over a copy of the Post with the kiss. "That seems to have been highly focused on your personal brand, not the company's. This, Miss Dubois, is wire fraud. It's conspiracy. This isn't a wrongful termination suit. This is a pre-trial hearing for a criminal case. Your criminal case." Sophia stared. The fight was gone. She was trapped. "Now," Graves said, leaning back, "my client, Miss Blackwood, is generous. She finds this all very distasteful. She is willing to drop the criminal charges and not pursue you for the full amount of the assets you stole." "I didn't steal." "On the condition," Graves continued, as if she hadn't spoken, "that you drop this frivolous lawsuit, sign a full, binding confession, and agree to the same non-disclosure agreement as Mr. Vance." Sophia's face crumpled. "So I get nothing?" "Oh, not at all," Graves said. "You get to stay out of a federal prison. The final ignominious end for Sophia Dubois didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened a month later, in a Starbucks in Weehawken. Her lawsuits were gone, her reputation shredded. The misappropriated assets lawsuit had bankrupted her. She was trying to buy a $6 latte. "Declined," the barista said, not looking up. "What?" "No, try it again," Sophia snapped. It's a new card." The barista sighed, ran it again. "Declined." Again. "Do you have cash?" Do you know who I am?" Sophia shrieked, the pressure of the last month exploding. "I ran a billion-dollar company. This is ridiculous." A teenager in line behind her, smelling a Karen moment, started filming on his phone. "Ma'am, I just need $6.50, the barista said. "I am Sophia Dubois. I will have your job." The video, titled "Billionaire's Mistress Has Starbucks Meltdown," had 10 million views by midnight. She was not just ruined. She was a meme. She was a joke. While the old guard was self-destructing, the new queen was building. Emma Blackwood's first act as chairwoman of the rebranded Blackwood Innovations was not to celebrate, but to tear down. She stood in the grand, opulent boardroom, Julian's throne room, with the architects of the Legacy Project. "Madam Chairwoman, Ms. Blackwood." The lead architect, a nervous man named Peterson, began. "Here are the revised plans for the spire. As Mr. Vance requested, it will be the tallest residential structure in the Western Hemisphere. A 20,000 square foot penthouse. Private." "Stop," Emma said. Her voice was quiet, but it silenced the room. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson. But you can throw these away." The architects looked at each other in horror. "But, Madam Chairwoman, this is 4 years of work." "It was 4 years of work on the wrong project," Emma said, walking to the giant model of the phallic, glittering tower. This is a monument to one man's ego. I'm not interested in ego. I'm interested in a legacy." She turned to the stunned team. "We are redesigning from scratch. The spire is gone. We are not building a private club for billionaires. We are building a community." She pointed to the base of the model. "This half. This will be converted into 1,000 units of state-of-the-art, dignified, low-income and middle-class housing. This private park?" She flicked a tiny, gold-plated model tree. "It's now a public park, and this space, this will be a new, fully funded STEM school for the district." "But, Ms. Blackwood," Peterson stammered, the profits, the margins on this design are razor-thin. Mr. Vance's design was obscene," Emma offered. "Don't worry about the margins, Mr. Peterson. Worry about the skyline. My father believed that a company's health was tied to the health of the city it lived in. We are not just building apartments. We are investing in the city. Now, can your team handle that? Or shall I find one that can?" Peterson, seeing the steel in her eyes, suddenly felt a rush of inspiration he hadn't felt in years. "Yes," he said, standing straighter. "Yes, Ms. Blackwood. We can." "Good," Emma said. "I want new blueprints on my desk in a week." When the story of the new Legacy Project broke, the city, which was already in her corner, fell in love. She wasn't just a cold-blooded corporate raider. She was a visionary. She was, as one columnist put it, the billionaire we didn't know we needed. 3 months later, autumn in New York, the giant, garish Vance capital letters had been scrubbed from the building. In their place, in elegant, brushed steel, were the words, "Blackwood Innovations." Emma stood in her office, the office she had, in fact, always owned. The heavy, dark mahogany and leather were gone, replaced by light woods, glass, and a breathtaking collection of modern art. The room was no longer a tomb of ego. It was a hub of light and air. Arthur Graves walked in, not bothering to knock. That was their way. "Madam Chairwoman," he said. He still called her that, but there was a warmth to it now. "Arthur," she replied, turning from the window. "The first quarter projections are in." He handed her a tablet. "It seems the market has a taste for integrity. We're up 30% over Vance Capital's best-ever quarter. The new legacy project has secured 3 massive institutional partners. The city is ecstatic." "Good," Emma said, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. "And one final piece of administrative news," Graves said, a rare, sly look in his eye. "Oh? You'll recall we are putting the Blackwood Foundation's first annual gala out for catering bids. We've received several." "And?" "A call came in this morning. A very persistent sales representative from a new vendor. Monarch Catering Supplies. Based in Queens." Emma's smile didn't waver, but her eyes, for a moment, were ice. "Go on." "The representative," Graves continued, was a Mr. Julian Vance. He was extremely insistent on speaking directly to you, to make the sale personally. He said he had a long-standing relationship with the principal. Emma was silent for a moment, looking down at the city she now so visibly helped to lead. She thought of the man screaming in her lobby. She thought of the man who had kissed his mistress for the world to see. And now she thought of the man on the phone, in a cheap suit, trying to sell her cocktail napkins. "And what did you tell him, Arthur?" she asked, her voice soft. "I informed Mr. Vance that all vendor communication must go through procurement," Graves said, his voice flat. "I also advised him that, given his familiarity with the company's principal, any further direct contact might be viewed as a conflict of interest, or perhaps harassment." "And the bid?" Emma asked. "Competitive on a per-unit basis," Graves said, with the slightest shrug. "But I've been informed the quality of their napkins is, to put it mildly, subpar. We will, of course, be declining." Emma finally laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh, but it was real, and it was warm, and it filled the entire office. "Thank you, Arthur. That's all. Madam Chairwoman." He left her alone. Emma Blackwood turned back to the window. The weight of the diamonds was gone. The weight of the gowns was gone. The weight of the name Vance was a distant, bitter-tasting memory. All that was left was the crown. It was heavy. It was hers. And she, for the first time in her life, realized she had been born to wear it. And just like that, the empire built on arrogance was brought down by the woman who laid the first stone. Emma Vance, Emma Blackwood, didn't just get revenge, she got justice. She reminded the world that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. Julian and Sophia thought they were taking over the company, but they were just employees, and they'd just been served the ultimate pink slip. What did you think of Emma's ultimate power move? Was Julian's downfall satisfying, or did he get what he deserved? Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you loved this story of drama, karma, and sweet, sweet revenge, please make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. We post new real-life drama stories every single week, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Share this video with a friend who needs to see that the best revenge is owning it all. Thanks for listening.